Good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Cohen. I'm the Vice President of Broadcasting here at NCMA Boston. And I just wanted to welcome you all to this amazing panel discussion. We will be getting started in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned, enjoy the music. And I'm also putting up our NCMA Boston calendar for all the events that we have coming up. And I'm going to let people trickle in, and then we'll get started. So enjoy the event.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Quick mic check. If you can hear me, there's a comment section on your right. Could we just press yes or say hello, please? All right, let's give this a shot here. So we're having some technical difficulties, at least on my end. So hopefully you'll be able to hear me. Um, Adam, if you could put the slides back up. Let's see if there we go. So the mic, for whatever reason, the camera's not working in multiple browsers. That's part of the fun of virtual, right? So good news, those of you that know me, you're not missing too much. So without further ado, thank you all for joining us here today, and let's get started. So good afternoon. Welcome to NCMA Boston, and thank you for coming to our, I believe it's the 8th event of the year. So we've had a pretty busy program here. We're honored today to host our event for February, and we're trying to get ready actually today for the our next event with it, which is coming forth for March. So we do want to give a special shout out. Let's see if I can get this to work here. So we do want to. Can you? There we go. Perfect. So thank you, Adam. So March workshop coming up on the 13th. That hopefully everybody's starting to register. Please, we have virtual opportunities as well as in person. We definitely invite you to come in person. We have breakfast and lunch. You get to spend some time with all of our speakers. As you can see, we have a dearth of speakers loaded for you and some great events to talk about this year. We're really excited. Go look at the program schedule on ncmaboston.org. I think you'll be excited to see what we have going on there. Definitely registration's open. We've already had dozens of people, if not more. I haven't seen the latest numbers already registering. So super excited to get more every day. Any questions, please reach out to your officers. You can find our contact information online as well. So for today's event, of course, an interactive panel discussion today. So we've got an exciting one between Ernst & Young and DCMA. We have three speakers that will be engaging today. So our panel discussion will be with Bob Spremulli and Andrew Johnian, both representing Ernst & Young, and Angel Rosario from DCMA. And as we're getting started late, I'm just going to hop straight over to the bios. So Bob Spremulli is a contractor for Ernst & Young for their government contract services team specifically. He assists clients with property management, compliance matters. Bob has over 38 years of diversified experience in government property management, contract administration, auditing, and accounting. As a senior property manager in his last position, he maintained a compliant government property system approved by the DCMA for 25 consecutive years. Bob is a subject matter resource in the property management lifestyle, system applications, audit planning and implementation, corrective action planning, and execution. Property management, he's got a comprehensive listing of experience and support for you. Bob is an active member in the National Property Management Association, the NPMA. Don't get that mixed up with our NCMA, of course. So that's NPMA, where he is also recognized as a consulting fellow. So Angel Rosario, one of our other speakers, is here today representing our Defense Contract Management Agency. Angel's a supervisor in the Government Contract Property Center of the DCMA. He has more than 20 years of government property management experience. Angel began his career with the U.S. Marine Corps, where he gained extensive experience in numerous positions related to administrative operations and logistics. In 2011, he joined the DCMA as an industrial property management specialist and later became a property administrator. He has worked with multiple defense contractors and has deep experience in contract property management training, asset management, auditing, and organizational leadership. Angel currently leads a team of property administrators overseeing defense contractors in the North Atlantic continental United States. Andrew Johnian, who will be playing the part for most of today as part of our facilitator for this discussion. Andrew Johnian is a staff member of Ernst & Young's Government Contract Services practice based out of Boston. Andrew assists clients in enhancing contractor business systems, internal controls, transaction due diligence, and export control compliance. Prior to joining Ernst & Young, Andrew spent a few years at the Charles Stark Draper Laboratory, Inc., which we have a few members representing today. Thank you for joining us, where he supported contracts, subcontracts, procurement, and property operations. Andrew holds a BA in political science from Fairfield University and an MA in national security studies from Georgetown University. He is a member of the FBI InfraGard Alliance, the Domestic Security Alliance Council, and ACES International. So just a few points here. We're going to put all of our speakers up on screen here in just a second for everybody to start listening in. But today, this is an interactive experience. So those of you that have joined us doing this before in StreamYard, welcome back. Thank you. For those of you that are new, throughout the discussion over the next hour and a half, if you'll notice on the right-hand side of the screen, there is a comment section. You can type a question in there that we can actually give to our speakers throughout the discussion. So hopefully that's going to facilitate some good interaction between the speakers and our audience today. So definitely excited about having the opportunity to engage in an interactive manner. This is something new to us. We tried it out once before. This is our second go around. So please, feel free to engage as you like. And at the same time, those of us today. So Adam Cohn, our VP of Broadcast, he's actually here, and myself, we're going to be facilitating some of this interaction throughout the process. So other than that, about 10 minutes before we are done here today, we're going to start cutting in and trying to get some last questions as per usual. So that's pretty traditional. Other than that, any other questions on the side that Adam and I can answer that aren't necessarily for our speakers, please let us know. Thank you so much for joining us. And without further ado, let's have our speakers on stage.
All right, and now the easy part. Thank you for the introduction. And speaking for Angel, Bob, and I, we're very pleased to be speaking at this event today. We'll be highlighting issues around government property and DCMA current areas of priority. As Don mentioned, we would like this webcast to be as interactive as possible, and we encourage any and all questions that you may have. So without further ado, let's get to the questions. And our first question today will be for Bob. So Bob, could you please explain the difference between answering to a prime contractor versus the government?
Yeah, sure, Jonathan or Andrew. Really from a subcontractor's point of view, reporting to a prime versus a government, really, in simplistic purposes, the prime is responsible for the oversight of its subcontractors. It really is no difference on how you report to them because the collaboration is the same. You're reporting under the same criteria you would, to the government. Unless you have a special requirement that where a sub has or a prime has a requirement where a sub needs to mark, let's say, an asset with a specialized number, a certain number that only specific to the prime, and the government really wouldn't care about that because all they care about is that it's marked with their markings. So really, again, a prime can levy corrective actions to a sub, just as the government can levy corrective actions to a prime.
Thank you for that, Bob. Sure. And so this next question is for the both of you. Angel, please go first. From your perspective, what are key risks around government property management?
Great question. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Some of the key risks around government property that I've noticed so far have been lack of procedures to help the employees within the organization know exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So that's one of the main risks that I've noticed over the last couple of years. Another one is not understanding the requirements and why they exist. It's important to know what the requirements are, but I found that if you actually go back and look at what is the reason for this requirement, why are we reporting the receipts? Why are we identifying the property, just like Bob mentioned? Why are we doing some of these things? If if we're able to tie that back into the actual the impact that it has with oversight and having custody and stewardship of government property, it helps us better explain it to our other stakeholders within the organization, leadership, and stuff like that. So the first one is lack of procedures, not having some detailed procedures that are adequate to the level of maturity of the business system. The second one is not having good information or understanding exactly why the requirements exist. And the third one is neglecting to adopt a team-centered approach. For example, the industry and the government, or within the organization, your custodians, your record custodians, and whoever's actually handling this property, not having a collaborative effort and having folks kind of departments fight over certain areas of property administration makes it a little bit harder because one hand doesn't know what the other one is doing and how it fits in the overall picture. So I found those are the three main risk areas that I could think of right now. Great question.
Yeah, good question.
Thank you, Angel. And Bob, would you like to chip in here?
Sure. I echo those same sentiments as Angel. You don't want a complacent approach. You don't want a vague or non-definitive policy or procedure. Then resources. Not having adequate staffing can really derail the best systems. You don't want a property group that has two people, managing, $5-10 million worth of property. And, same thing with for in a warehouse, you have two people working in a warehouse, but they're managing, 50,000 line items. You got to have the right resources. Changes in technology. If your company's implementing a new business system or introducing a homegrown system, it requires a good strategic plan, and you want to have all these stakeholders involved. Again, collaboration and communication is really a key there. And, really the organization management, you have to have management support to drive down the initiatives to all the levels, and without that, you'll be fighting an uphill battle. You got to have that support from top management, or, your system will fail.
Those are all great points that you make. Organizational alignment is very key when it comes to property management.
Yeah.
And so, Bob, the next question is for you. I just want to get from your experience, what organization or department does property management typically report to, or does it vary? What organizational departmental structures have you experienced operate the most effectively?
Yeah, that's a good one. Really in the industry, it's all over the map. Some report to contracts and legal, some report to operations, others report to finance. In my opinion, it really doesn't matter as long as your organizational management can provide the services and support to the property function to, implement and promote, the business processes and ensure that the, policies and procedures and guidelines are met. Also, that they're viewed as critical to the organization. From my experience, I've been under contracts and legal, and that's appeared to have operated more effectively. Again, as long as you have that support from top management. One of my favorite VPs was a big advocate of property. And with his support, we got a ton of things done. And he was really key to getting a lot of those initiatives, pushed down to the functional departments. Because anytime you have change, you're going to get pushback. So you really need someone from that level to help resolve some of those pushbacks and get all the stakeholders to agree. So that's very important.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, change can be certainly difficult, but it seems like the organizations that have the most success are those that are able to adapt and have the agility to move resources in personnel. I was wondering, Bob, as a follow-up, to what extent you think the programs offices or engineering directorate should be sort of involved in the property management process?
Oh yeah, I mean they're always involved in that. I mean, they have hands on that property. They know what property they need. So you're, from my experience, you're interfacing with them all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that sort of goes back to one of the key themes of our discussion here today is collaboration and being able to talk within and amongst teams. And so, Angel, I'd like to shift the conversation to you. Would you like to talk a little bit about DCMA's sort of organizational structure?
Absolutely. From a government contract property perspective, just like Bob mentioned, I've seen it all. We've had our partners, our industry partners, so the defense contractors. I've seen them fall within the quality assurance sphere, within compliance, within logistics, finance. Seen it all. And to Bob's point, essentially, if you have leadership buy-in and able to help you out, it doesn't really matter where you're at as long as you have buy-in and you're able to articulate what are some of the benefits and some of the value that we offer. It makes us, fight that battle a lot easier and get the resources necessary to essentially to meet our deliverables, contract deliverables. But within DCMA, the Government Contract Property Center, the way we have split up our workload is we are geographically dispersed. So I am in the North Atlantic area. So I used to cover the Massachusetts, Vermont, Connecticut, the Northeast, which is a majority of our chapter here for NCMA. But over the last year, just like you mentioned, Andrew, change could be a beautiful thing, and sometimes it could be challenging. But we were able to pivot and realign our workload and distribute where our property administrators are located to where the work is. So as of last year, my team now oversees Pennsylvania, Maryland, parts of Maryland, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and those are our areas. So we fall in within our property administrators are located near the geographic area where their contractors are located, and then so that's on the physical sense. As far as organizational wise, we fall within headquarters. So our headquarters is down in Virginia, and within DCMA government contract property, we have three different regions. We have East, West, and Central. Central and International, they're together. And I'm obviously on the East region, and we all have a different director, but we all fall as an umbrella, kind of like an octopus. We have one main director, and that ensures that we have consistency across the board as needed. And we have to have some flexibilities because there's differences in how a large defense contractor that's located in Connecticut is versus the same company or a different company in California. So that's how we are geographically dispersed based on where the work is located, but we all fall within the same tree through headquarters down in Virginia.
Wow, that is an impressive geographic footprint, and it just sort of highlights how critical the defense industrial base and the contracting community is to the national, regional, and local economies. So this next question is for you, Angel. What kind of government property initiatives does DCMA have in FY24 and beyond?
Quite a few. So our over the last couple of years, we've turned over to three different directors. So we had, and they usually change about every 2 to 3 years or so. We have a new general that takes place, and over the last few years, we've had some different strategic goals placed, and we have a long-term plan. So right now, the current plan is we're evaluating many of the processes of how we do the work. We're trying to streamline it to ensure that we could get rid of high effort, low value type of activities, because we're combating the same challenges that a lot of our industry partners are combating, which is we have a war on talent. We're trying to retain talent, attract new talent, and we're trying to navigate through the political sphere of the continuing resolution and things like that. So we're all fighting for resources, and one of the big initiatives that we have right now is reviewing every single task that a property administrator has to do. What are some of the requirements? What are some of the overarching requirements that have us the mandate that we do that we review specific elements, or that we audit against the contractor to see, okay, are they meeting these thresholds? And in cases where it doesn't make sense or we don't have any overarching law or regulation that says you have to do that, we're trying to go back to the drawing board, update our policies, our procedures. Maybe we go to the Pentagon and we say, hey, we're spending a lot of time looking at this item or this part of the property management sphere, and it's not really yielding a lot of results, and it's not really a big risk because we're operating with laws that were established decades and decades ago. So now maybe we need to modernize to, I believe, Bob's point with technology. We may be able to take more risk in certain areas and less risk in other ones because now things are automated. So those are some of the biggest initiatives. We're streamlining our processes, reviewing everything that we do as of right now, and eliminating it or recommending for something to be removed.
So in other words, it sounds like you're really busy.
Yes. Immediately after our panel today, I have one of those initiatives. Actually, we're reviewing our guidebook and some of the things that our guidebook is kind of like our mandate. It's our desk instructions of what we're supposed to do, what every property administrator does, how they do it, and what frequency, to what level, the worksheets and all that stuff. So we're near the end of that revision, and so immediately after I get off the phone call with our panel today, about 20 minutes later, I'll be jumping into that one. So yes, busy but fun.
Well, that's great. Perfect timing. So I was just wondering if DCMA is offering any trainings or presentations for contractors to help educate them on the various rules and regulations and even assist them in mitigating risk. What is your availability or DCMA's availability in general?
Absolutely. Yes. We're in high demand, and we love it because it is a collaborative effort. With that said, we're trying to obviously look at what are some of the resources and not reinvent the wheel, because DCMA, we're not specifically positioned to perform or conduct and provide training and certifications and that type of stuff. We have other partners that do that. But part of what we're doing right now is we're having collaboration sessions just like this one. We do not offer routine training, but what we do is we collaborate with associations like you mentioned, NPMA. I think Don said not to be confused with NCMA, but we have our own sister organizations, the National Property Management Association. So we present at their national seminars. We also participate in events like this one with NCMA. I want to give a shout out to my folks. I see a couple of folks in the line that, like Joe Michela from the Connecticut Central Chapter for NCMA. But we participate with them. We do joint meetings. We distribute any information, disseminate information that we learn. We also have NDIA, which is the National Defense Industrial Association. We got an opportunity to brief them. It's been a long month. It was either at the beginning of this month or at the end of last month sometime. But we were able to meet with them about some of the changes and some of the streamlining efforts and initiatives that we're having within DCMA. And they help us spread the word, provide training, and then get insight for what industry's seeing. These are some of the challenges that we're seeing. We should do this training or that training. Specific to training and other training opportunities, some of our partners that are doing that are, like I mentioned, NCMA does it, NPMA does some training. And then we have the Defense Acquisition University, and that's super easy for anybody that wants to look it up. It's dau.edu, Delta Alpha Uniform Echo Delta Uniform. So you go to that one and you're able to take the same exact training that we take at DCMA, property administrators. In those courses, they have courses that you have to pay because they're paid for courses. And there's also a lot of free webinars that they offer. For example, once a month, they do the Government Property Matters, and any of us could join in that. We could share some of the lessons learned and some of the things that we're feeling. We're feeling in the field, something that needs to be clarified. We just had one of those last week. And the last one is the DoDProcurementToolbox.com. A lot of our contracting specialists, they're well aware of that website because that's what shows us how to transfer property between contracts and things like that. So that's another one, and they have about 3 to 5 training sessions every month. But yeah, DAU, DAU, DoD Procurement Toolbox, and then all the resources like events like this one.
All right, that's great. Sounds like a lot of skill building opportunities. I guess my last question for you, Angel, at least for in the short term here, is could you comment on the current staffing level at DCMA and how it impacts contractors?
Absolutely. No surprise to anyone that we're currently in a continuing resolution. So we are all eagerly looking, staying abreast of the news and trying to find out if they're going to pass a budget. That does cause challenge. So the impact to the industry partners. is that it causes a little bit of challenge because if we do not have a budget, it makes it harder for us to plan whenever we have to perform an on-site review. If we have to travel to, let's say, Vermont or something like that to perform an audit, and we don't have a budget passed, and we're going on a month to month, and it just makes it a little bit challenging. But part of the initiative that I mentioned earlier, which has to do with streamlining our efforts and seeing what we could do virtually, it's as a result of that. So the staffing level, we have approximately 170 something property administrators within the agency, and they're spread out throughout the nation and overseas. So we're trying to always learn different ways to do things that we're currently doing that we have to do better. So streamline it more efficiently and filling whatever vacant roles we have. But it's still as challenging as ever just because the budgetary constraints that we have. Great question.
Right. Thank you for that, Angel. And so now I'll shift to Bob. So I think a lot of people on the call and in the webcast have probably seen the new government property rule that was recently published in the Federal Register. So the Defense Department consolidated 4 property management clauses into one. And Bob, so could you explain how does the consolidation of the DFARS clauses impact contractors?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm sure Angel can give a lot more detail on the specifics, but basically it clarified the reporting requirements and they formulated it into one clause, the management and reporting of government property. It streamlined the clause and made it easier to understand. It replaces I forgot the 2000 or 211, 7007, 7001, 7002, and 7004. But really, the most significant change I see here is the timeline for reporting the change of status, like receipt, transfer, or shipment within the 7 days of when the date the change in status occurred. Unless otherwise specified in the contract, and that could be significant. If a contractor didn't previously do that in a timely manner, it could require you to update your procedures and your processes for compliance. So, remember now this is a regulation with a specific time frame that is auditable. So you need to be aware of that. Other than some going to a single platform in this GFP module. On the government side, it allows them more efficiencies. They can create more reporting, more standardized reports. Hopefully this creates the ability for them to share this property and possibly get a favorable audit opinion at some point. But I think this will help them to get there.
Those seem like very tangible steps that can help contractors. And Angel, would you like to chip in here on some of the specifics?
Sure thing. Absolutely. I think it's a good step forward. The Federal Register actually had this open for public comment, public consideration, and they took a lot of the recommendations. And then when it closed and it was adjudicated back in January, it might have been December. Back in December, it gave us a draft of what was coming, and some of the notable changes that we noticed is that it did streamline it. It made it quite easier, so that if you see this clause in the contract, you're able to outline and go step by step and look at each individual requirements within, instead of having to pull up different clauses. If the clause was added to the contract, piecemeal, sometimes they don't copy and paste the whole clause. They'll insert the reference, and then you have to go and find the copy of it. But now it's all consolidated into one, which is great. Some of the clarifications that I noticed were, in the past, the previous clauses, oftentimes whenever we're performing audits, our partners may say, "Oh, I only have to report the receipt of government property to the registry." That's like the biggest or the main thing. But the clause specifically clarifies that there's going to be more than one reportable transaction that needs to be documented, and you have those 7 business days to do that. So some of them are, if you're transferring property between contracts, that has to happen within 7 days. If you're reporting the shipments because you shipped government property back, now you have to do that within those 7 days. And if you have any serially managed items, these are items that are specifically called out in the contract that need to be serially managed in the registry. Those also need to be added to the registry within 7 days. They need to be reported. So those are some of the major takeaways. Like Bob mentioned, in the past, it didn't specifically say that you had 7 business days to do it, but now it's telling you, okay, you have 7 business days to do it, unless the contract allows for more days or less days, depending on what the contract says. And these are some of the different reportable transactions that need to occur. The good thing is that a lot of those are automated. So whenever you're transferring property from one contract to the next, that is part of the GFP attachment in the module, whatever contract writing system the program office or the contractor and the contract officer and the buying office, whatever they're using, that will be automated and it automatically feeds the registry whenever you're getting rid of property because you're dispositioning it and you put it into PCARs, which anybody that deals with clearing property off of a contract and getting rid of it off a contract and utilizing it on something else, those also are automated. So it makes it a little bit easier because there's less steps that you have to do. And it also opens up the aperture for smaller mom and pop shops, smaller contractors. And now you're able to, just like in the past, but you're able to also make routine updates maybe once a week, since you have to do it every 7 days. Maybe once a week you go in and you upload all your updates at that time. So it's quite a few things that are touched and clarified on the clause, on the consolidated clause, and I think it's a good step in the right direction to hopefully get us into a qualified opinion that says that we're good to go. They can rely on our systems.
Okay, excellent. I guess we'll go to our next question now, Angel. This question is for you. What are common deficiencies that you see in some property corrective action requests, otherwise known as CARs?
Ooh, good one. So very good question. So I don't have specific data for the agency, so don't quote me on the exact numbers as to like how many of each. But the 3 most common that I recall are written procedures, not having any written procedures or missing some of the elements of how a task is supposed to be performed or safeguarded. That's one of them. Also, reporting to the registry, which is the topic that we just mentioned a couple of moments ago. So reporting to the registry is the second biggest driver of corrective action requests. And the third one is contractor self-assessment, which is a contractor's own internal assessment of how their company is performing for the property elements. And the caveat to that one is any applicable elements that applies to the contractor, they should be looking at that. And what we notice is that in some cases they may be looking at the records or they may be looking at the physical inventory, but they're not looking at how do they report they're receiving. Do they report things to the registry? Are they marking the property as government owned? So those are that's what we notice within contractor self-assessment, either not conducting them or when you conduct them, they may be missing one of the elements or some of the elements that apply that they should be looking at. But yeah, written procedures, reporting to the registry, and self-assessments.
Thank you for that. And so the next question will shift to Bob. Bob, could you explain what types of self-assessments that property management teams should do or be conducting on a continual basis? What works well, what doesn't work well, how often should they be performed? Just in general, provide some best practices around self-assessments.
Sure. Like Angel alluded to, yeah, I mean, that's one of the areas that a lot of times doesn't get a lot of attention. But in a nutshell, the assessments, they need to incorporate the analysis of all the property outcomes to ensure that your adequate processes exist and to document and control government property. It has to be a comprehensive review to measure, analyze, and report, using statistical sampling and sampling techniques to evaluate those areas. You want the supporting documentation to establish a clear and concise audit trail of all those areas that are audited. I mean, you need to gauge the performance of your system and the effectiveness against or across all the departments responsible for managing property. What doesn't work are simple check the box type spreadsheets with little or no backup to support the documentation. You need to assure the government property administrator that your self-assessment process is robust and that you can provide a complete current audible record of all the transaction with supporting objective evidence. So really, that's what you're looking for.
Okay, Angel, would you like to add anything?
Sure thing. Yep, I definitely agree. Self-assessment programs are not typically a one-size-fit-all, because you may have, if you look at our the list of attendees right now, we have some that are in very big defense contractors and some that are in very small contractors. So the level and the maturity of your self-assessment program should coincide. And essentially what we're looking for is for the self-assessment to articulate the process of how you perform the element review. How do you identify the root causes, the corrective action to make sure that the property is not lost or that it's not being misused? And expanding on the notion of the one size fit all. One size fits all, it's usually flawed because you're either going overkill, you're documenting every single little nuance, or you may not be covering anything at all. And to Bob's point, if you're just saying, yeah, my self-assessment is we're receiving things, we are identifying it, yep. But if there's no objective evidence to support that, then the company may be doing themselves a disservice because they may not find actual critically thinking about it and saying, okay, you know what, where can we improve if something needs to be improved? As a defense auditor, whenever we notice a very in-depth self-assessment and we're like, okay, they know what they're doing it exactly the way that we would do it, or they're doing it even better than we're doing it. Whenever we see that, it gives us a little bit more confidence in the system. We're able to show that, you know what, the contractor is right on point, and we may be able to reduce the risk rating, which allows for us to go see them every 3 years, every 4 years, instead of looking at them every year or every other year. We have fidelity and we have confidence in the system.
All right, thanks, Angel. And we actually have a question from the audience that I'd like to get to. Does DCMA rely on self-assessments for its own risk assessments?
Great question. So when you say rely on self-assessments, it's one of the elements that we look at and we review it, and it helps us kind of understand, okay, well, is this a high risk, low risk? Does the self-assessment show that they have deficiencies and they didn't really correct it? Or do they have deficiencies and they corrected it? And do we need to provide more insight or more review and more guidance? Or did they handle it spot on? For example, let's say that the contractor performs a self-assessment and they found that 5 out of the 20 items that were received in any given year were not recorded. They didn't do a record. And then the corrective action, for example, that they found in the self-assessment may be, okay, we just updated the records. We made sure that the document or the items are documented. To me, that wouldn't be a good enough self-assessment or a corrective action, because now I'm saying, okay, well, how do you prevent that from happening? What led to them not recording it? Are the procedures not good? Are they not readily known? What are some of the challenges that you found as you were doing that deep dive? But if a contractor says, hey, we found 5 items that were not recorded out of the 20 or whatever, it doesn't really matter the number, but we found this is what we did. We found the root cause corrective action. We implemented this, then we tested it again. We found that we're doing way better now. Boom, that sounds like an excellent. And they have, essentially, they're safeguarding the government property. That we're safeguarding it not just because it's government property, we're all taxpayers, so we want to make sure that our monies are safe and sound, but because oftentimes this property is property that belongs to the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines,
Right.
Coast Guard, whoever. They need this stuff. And as we mentioned, budgetary constraints, continuing resolution, and funding. A lot of the things that we have in the government are very old, and oftentimes it's very hard to get new ones if that one gets lost or damaged. So a self-assessment is critical, and it helps us to essentially to figure out what risk level and how much scrutiny or how often we need to come and do a review. Great question.
Hey, Angel,
you,
quickly, on the self-assessment, would you, if a contractor is doing, a really good job on their self-assessments, and they've got a pretty good track record, are you in favor of maybe skipping some of those elements in future audits, or how often do you rely on the contractor's assessments? If they're doing a really good job and they've got all this documentation and all this backup, and they're able to provide it to you, and you're in agreement and you feel good about that, how do you work that?
Absolutely, we take it as part of our system surveillance. So we'll actually look at that one element. And self-assessment is one of 22 elements that may be applicable. It may be contractor may only have 5, they may have 3, they may have just 2. But we look at self-assessments and the detail and the backup documentation. How do they perform it? And to the point, if we have them on a biannual schedule, so we say, let's say moderate risk, and we say, okay, they're moderate risk, they're fairly new, and then we look at the self-assessment, and the self-assessment is very in-depth, and we haven't found, and they haven't reported or self-disclosed any findings, or if they did, they found it and they were able to resolve it. We may say, okay, they're ready for low risk, and we could look at them every 3 or 5 years, or 3 to 4 years, or something like that. So absolutely, we'll look at it, but we won't just look at the self-assessment and say, okay, you reported this, so we're good to go. We're going to push it out. We'll validate that it's good, and then the next PMSA after that, the next property management system analysis. We're full of acronyms in DoD. The PMSA, which is the audits or the assessments, once we validate, yep, their self-assessment found the same thing that we did, we're able to go ahead and recommend either a lower or higher threshold. So we're either do it more frequently or less frequently based on that. Good. And another good point, this is a little, I would say a little pro tip. Oftentimes, whenever we find a self-assessment, and contractor may report, this is where we're struggling, and we're having some challenges with X, Y, and Z. And then we do our independent audit because we have to pull our own random samples. We have to do our own review. And if we're able to replicate that and say, yeah, you know what, you're absolutely right, this is an area of risk of whatever, we're able to be your ally. And it really is about collaborative environment, because as property administrators, contracting specialists, whatever the title is within your organization, oftentimes you're fighting the same battles that we are for resources. So we may be able to explain during the outbrief when we invite senior leadership to the meeting, say, okay, these are some of the things that they're working on, and this is the amount of work that you're doing, and these are some of the areas that you might not be doing as well on. You know, your office did a fantastic job at finding something very similar on their efforts. So whatever their recommendations are, you know, I can't tell you how to hire and what to do. That's your money, but this may be a good opportunity to look at what they're recommending, because they hit it right on the head. And oftentimes, in my experience at least, oftentimes they've taken us validating that and showing that, and oh yeah, Bob knows exactly what he's doing. He was right. And then Bob is able to say, see, I told you that we needed X, Y, and Z because of this, or we don't need to do this because of that. So it tends to help out. And that's the approach that I take, and that's the approach that I try to instill in my property administrators as well. Make it a collaborative effort. It's not, you found this, you had this wrong. It's, okay, this is what we could do to fix it. And here's some of the things and how you guys already identified that. Sometimes when they hear the customer tell them something, even though you've told them 1,000 times, all of a sudden when I say it, now it kind of matters. But I'm like, no, Bob already told you about this. I saw the self-assessment plan. So,
yeah, thank you. Well, this next topic is going to be on the property closeout life cycle. It could be a rather lengthy topic, but I was wondering if you both could sort of explain in 30 seconds or less what the most important steps are in the property closeout life cycle.
You want me to go, Angel? I'll go.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Bob, you're up.
Yeah, I think from my experiences, really the internal notification, it's not always communicated, in a timely manner. It's a process that you really want to iron out and get that word out that the contract is closed, so that your property people and your warehouse people can go ahead and start doing that inventory if they have to have that inventory done. Any property on the floor. That's the other thing, property on the floor, not being returned in a timely manner, not being returned to a storage location. That's a one that I've been experienced with. You prepare all your property lists, you're ready to transfer property, and you finalize everything, only to find out 2 months later that you had a bunch of stuff still on the floor that wasn't accounted for.
Yeah.
So that makes it very difficult.
Okay, and Angel, how about you?
All right, start the timer. T-30. I already lost like 5 seconds of that. Contrary to the name, contract property closeout, I think it's a process that really should take place at all stages. The moment you receive that property, figure out when do you think there's going to be access. Meaning, if the piece of property is nothing more than a storage container that was used during shipment, well, you don't have to wait until, if you don't need that same piece of equipment until at all for the rest of the contract, start the disposition process so that it can help you close it out later on. Yeah. So with that said, contrary to the name contract closeout or property closeout, think of it as a life cycle event. Throughout the whole life cycle, evaluate it, do access screening, excess screening, and then as soon as you know that it's no longer needed, try to see if you can get it reused. Talk to the program office, and we can ship it out, and that will help close it out at the end, so you don't have leftover property at the end, like Bob just mentioned.
Yeah, good point.
Great. Bob, what are some of the benefits and challenges of collaborating with the government on contract property management and administration?
Yeah, I guess the challenge really is building the organizational mindset that, the exposure of possible pitfalls or shortcomings and sharing that information with the government won't result in a negative opinion from the government, in the form of a CAR or a potential finding. This attitude really needs to be improved to be successful. The benefit really from the government is they can be a wealth of helpful information. They can be value added in the industry. It gives the GPA confidence that you're doing the right thing. You're asking them questions, and it gives you credibility. There's no animosity there. So I think that's very important.
Okay, now Angel.
Absolutely. I agree. Lack of organizational trust between parties is typically one of the biggest challenges, because each party may interpret that like the government is out to get me, or the contractor may think, the government contractor may think the government's out to get me, and then the government may think, the contractor's trying to hide something. Where, believe it or not, we're all one part of the team, so we're all one team. We all play our different parts, and we in the government cannot do what we do. And when I say we, the government, I mean the actual customer, the service member in the field. They could not do what they do without the defense industrial support that we have, without defense industrial base. So we need each other, and I believe building that trust by having, sometimes we have to hold each other accountable, but building that trust is a challenge that we currently have. We just need to make sure that we know that we are one team, because one party cannot do it without the other one. But the benefit, I believe you asked about the benefit and challenge. So that was a challenge. As far as the benefit for us is, we are a fairly niche market. It's not a ton of people that grow up trying to be property administrators and contracting officers when they're like 6 years old. That doesn't happen. So within our industry, we have quite a few opportunities to build on some of that trust and build some of our networking, like you mentioned, NPMA, which is the one that I'm a part of primarily, and of course NCMA, NDIA, and there's a lot of other avenues, venues for us to discuss and share. So that's how we could build some of that trust. And the benefit is that we are a small enough niche that we're able to work together and build on some of that trust.
Great. All right. And this next question is for Bob. Bob, thinking about the FAR, how would you ensure compliance with FAR 52245-1 and other relevant laws and regulations?
Yeah, that's good. That's there's several, but basically your written procedures that explain responsibilities and addresses all the processes to ensure that the property outcomes are all appropriate, and all the property in your possession and your subcontractors' possession are explained. They have to assign responsibility to the functional groups and stakeholders to ensure that they're fulfilled. Those actions are fulfilled in a timely and consistent manner. And you also have to have a robust self-assessment system or process that can assess the health of your property management system. Education and training, from management down through all the stakeholders. It provides visibility and promotes the property function, throughout the organization. And again, organizational support and teamwork. These are all things that we talked about before, and it's all that positive application and compliance to your written procedures. The other thing too, I think, is your records. Everything in property revolves around records, and it's really the mainstay of your database for control of property. And that's been one of my mantras. Is always been documentation. you have a so-so system and you've got good records, you can usually avoid bad consequences because you can go back and you can correct anything that you had or did wrong because you've got good records. It's when you don't have those records that you get in trouble because now you've got to go researching those records.
Yeah.
You got to go figure out what happened, where they went to, and it's just a huge reconciliation process that you got to undertake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's helpful advice, and it sort of leads into some best practices when it comes to things like receiving and records and disposition.
Yep.
We talked extensively about self-assessments and reporting already. So in the interest of time, I think I'll move on to the next question on our list. And we're going to stay with Bob for this one. How would you communicate and coordinate with the government on issues related to transfers in subcontracts, audits, and disputes?
I think one of the most important practices is to educate the support groups and stakeholders regarding the importance of their responsibilities and how their roles affect the overall property system.
Mm-hmm.
From my experience, I've always found that explaining to a custodian or stakeholder why they're being audited or why their job is important, how their function interconnects to the overall system integrity has always been positive. Also explains to them the negative ramifications if it's not performed correctly. It provides trust and communicative relationship within your organization. They always gain an appreciation and come away with a better understanding, improves the stakeholders' confidence and helps you improve your overall system. Again, it's internal collaboration and respect goes a long way.
Thanks for that, Bob. We have a couple questions in the comments section that I'd like to get to. The first one is, so property sometimes is sent to the government in the field and then it's later returned to the contractor. Angel, from a DCMA perspective, I think your insight would be valuable. What advice can you give the contractor to prevent this from happening?
I'm reading the question. Thank you for putting it on the screen, making sure that I understand it. So when property is sent to the government in the field and a property record have been updated. All right. So it sounds like the government, so the property, so the asset, whatever the item is, and please, LaDonna, let me know if I get it wrong, but it sounds like the property is being sent to the customer, to the service member, wherever it's located. And then at some point it comes back to the contractor without a contract. Did I get that about right? I'm looking in the chat to see. Trying to make sure that I understand the question, but if that is the intent of the question, if it relates to property coming back after it's being sent to the customer and they just return it without a contract or something like that, it's a headache for us as well. So I share your pain on that. What can be done about that is to Bob's point. Yeah, so the property is being returned after the contract is over. So there's no contract requirement for it, right? So the property is returned. There's no contract to it. So there's really no need for you to have it. And the government, the customer, whoever received this, shouldn't have done that in the first place. So our recommendation, what I've seen oftentimes, and I don't speak for the entire DCMA, so I'll just speak on my own behalf. But what I've seen work is, obviously, as soon as we know where the property came from, try to reach out to someone. And we call that discrepant shipping. So shipping that was sent, discrepantly. So the property was sent in. There's no contract requirement for it. Now you have it in your custody. You can't just put it in a dumpster or just return to sender because you need a freight service provider to go ahead and send that stuff back. So what we would do is we would reach out to the customer if we happen to know them, program office, or what contract they may have come to. And there is an item manager. The government has item managers, which they have the NSN numbers, and on those numbers they know like essentially who are the points of contact for this. The paperwork like the 1149 will be useful for that if they send it. Sometimes I've seen a crate comes in and it doesn't really have anything, or it will spike out, okay, we're sending you a gearbox, and then when you open it up, there's no gearbox and it weighs 1,000 pounds less than it would have been if it had a gearbox. So then we had to do a little bit of investigative, segregate the property, keep it as is, do an inventory of whatever came in. And then we reach out to the item manager or to whoever it should have gone to. And just my advice is contact your property administrator as soon as you get one of those. And what we will do is we'll try to tie the loose ends and figure out, okay, where should this belong? At some point, if we're not having any luck with finding it, we will ask for it to be either returned to another government source or provide you the funding so it can be shipped back, or we'll try to submit it through PCAR's disposition if we're able to identify what contract it should have came in on. And for a little bit of background, typically what happens, what I've seen happen, is that you'll have somebody in the field. This will happen at overhaul and repair facilities. So something is coming in for rework, and maybe the ship has left the port, and they're like, "Oh, this is the address that we sent all the other ones. So send this one to this one," thinking that a modification was going to be cut or hasn't been cut or some type of ordering agreement, and it's not funded. So it just makes it challenging because there's a disconnect between the program office and then whoever took the quote unquote initiative to send it in without a contractual requirement, not knowing that we really cannot touch it. And it doesn't really belong to anybody at this point. It belongs to the government, but it doesn't belong, it's not in the custody of the contractor. So whenever you have those issues, as soon as it happens, as soon as you have it, just let the property administrator know, this is the part that came in, this is what we think came in, this is the paperwork, we don't know who to send it back to, and then we'll help tie up the loose ends. Unfortunately, it's one of those gray areas. It's not a standard answer, just because we have to do research and figure out where it came from, why they sent it. Are they still at that location? Because if we send it back to them, they may not be there. The ship might have already left. So it just makes it a little, no pun intended, but the ship might have already left, and there's no longer anybody to receive it on that end. Hopefully that helps a little bit. And if not, feel free to contact me. You'll have my contact information at the end of the presentation. I'll be able to help out with that as well.
All right, great. And now we'll shift over to Bob. Bob, I was wondering if you could talk to how to leverage technology and innovation in order to improve efficiency and effectiveness of contract property processes. What tips would you give to contractors?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Over the years, there's been a multitude of system software companies, specifically built to help manage government property. Asset Smart, Sunflower Systems, Go Plus. Any one of them can improve efficiency and effectiveness of your business. However, the key is finding the one that works with your current business systems, and how do you leverage that into your company? And that's the hard part. There's factors such as cost, and how that implementation impact your existing business systems. To what degree are your processes going to have to be refashioned? There's a lot of decisions. And again, collaboration and communication with all the stakeholders is a key here. Again, you need your organizational support too. Even if you want a system, but it's always come down to, in my experience, cost. How expensive is this going to be? And that's the tough nut to crack.
Yes, budgeting and resources is always something to be cognizant of. Let's see. For our next question, we'll go with Bob. What are some common pitfalls of not maintaining an adequate or compliant property management system? And then I'd like to get Angel's take on this as well.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. Unfortunately, many places don't realize the impact until it's too late. But failure to maintain a compliant property management system can lead to the disapproval of your property management system. And some of those factors are, it's a financial impact to the contractor. Revocation of the government's assumptions, risk of loss under the government property clause. Now you become liable and responsible for all loss, including the loss, theft, or damage or destruction of property. If you're building, tanks, and the lift drops one, and you have a disapproved system, you're responsible for that damage. So it could be substantial. Also under the business, the DoD business systems rule, the withholding of 5% of the amounts due from progress payments and performance-based payments, and they can direct the contractor to withhold 5% from its billings on interim cost vouchers. Also, note if deficiencies are found in multiple systems like accounting, EVMS, estimating, MMAS, or purchasing, that amount may be up to 10%. So, as you can see, these could be very significant if you're not in compliance.
Sure, Angel. And would you like to add to that, especially as it relates to the 22 elements in property systems?
Absolutely. Bob stole my thunder because he hit it he hit the nail right on the head, and where it will drive the most ire and the most impact is the monetary part, right? So like you mentioned, you may get an elevated risk in the contractor in CBAR, which is the contracting business system risk rating that our contracting peers use. So whenever you have a higher rating, the customer sees that, and anybody either soliciting for proposals or for any type of work, they may look at that and say, you know what, I'm gonna go with contractor B instead of contractor A because of X, Y, and Z. So it's just another risk indicator that may prevent you from gaining new contracts if you're trying to get more government work. Besides all the other monetary, like the withholds and the other challenges that come with that, obviously you will get more scrutiny. Now we're going to be there more frequently to perform the reviews more often to make sure that the risk is lessened. And those are all, obviously, there are also going to be expenses, whether it be overhead expenses or any other type of expense. You have to increase your inventory accuracy or your frequency. That also drive up costs. So it's not a desirable position to be in with a unapproved system. But more than that, I would thinking back in the whole collaborative effort. If you think about the assets that we're receiving and that we're safeguarding, these are assets that our service members need. So if we don't receive it accurately or correctly or in a timely fashion, another program office may have to now spend the money that they had, whatever limited funds they had, to buy new assets instead of reusing some of the ones that we currently have, because they may not know the total balances of what we have on stock on record. Something as simple, even if it's not a tank, it may be what we often see. A lot of our aircraft are over 60 years old and they're flying, and of course we have some new shiny toys, but a lot of our aircrafts are very old within DoD. And when you have a new aircraft, it's fine and dandy. You have high tech, high gizmos, and the OEM, which is the official equipment manufacturer, the contractors, they're going to support that for the next couple of years. But then after a certain amount of time, 50 years ago, they may not be supporting that platform anymore. So you may have a piece of property that maybe cost initially, it may have cost $1,000, and now it's not even worth our time, but nobody else is producing it. We have a big supply chain issue where a lot of our stuff is being made overseas, or we're trying to prevent some of that stuff from not being made overseas. So whenever you do not have an effective government property system and it's disapproved, you're obviously going to get the scrutiny. But if you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, we're trying to safeguard and make the best bang for the bucks that we currently have, just because we are facing a lot of budgetary constraints and we don't have an open checkbook like we may have had, decades ago.
Thanks for that, Angel. And before we get on to the next question on our list here, I was wondering if you wanted to address Ann's question on cost effectiveness.
There you go. Ability and thought process as it relates to contractor acquired property on development or cost type contracts, where it may be more cost effective to have a dollar value threshold or similar type of exemption on tracking every very little material item and other accounting and tracking requirements. Yes, great question. So it's all about, a lot of it has to do with, it's a regulation, which means that it's a law. So if we fund a contract and we have title to the property, and we use that mechanism to furnish the property under that contract, before the contracting officer does that, they have to look at a PGI 245. I forget what a PGI stands for, but it's something guides and instruction. Whatever PGI stands for, I'll put it in the chat if I get a chance to. But part of that, some of the rules that the contracting officer has to consider is, do we have to furnish this property? Because it may often be more beneficial for the contractor to purchase it on their own. It's their property. We have a firm fixed price contract or something like that. They buy it, they own it, and then they just deliver us the end item. If it's not cost effective, or the contractor does not have access to purchase that material, even if it's low value, but it's a military material, there are certain cases where we have to provide, low value property because we already have a contract, where we have a ton of it, and it will be cheaper to maintain the contract. So there's a lot of reasons why the government may give the property to the contractor. But since it's a regulation that we have to safeguard it, and we have to make sure that we don't lose out on the property, it makes it a little bit challenging to move away from that requirement, because it's a law, and it's safeguarding the government dollars, taxpayer dollars. With that said, there are other mechanisms that can be used. For example, if it's a nonprofit, not-for-profit business, they may be able to enter into different clause 52. It's called FAR 52 245-1 Alt 1, and depending on the type of organization that you're working with, exactly what you mentioned. If it's less than $5,000, the company keeps title of it. You don't have to track it. It's your stuff. And if it's more than $5,000, maybe we have to track it. And growing in popularity as of late has been OTs, other transactions, which these are not contracts. But I'm quite sure NCMA does a lot of OTs, other transactions, not non-procurement instruments. And in those, you could actually spell out if it's a joint effort where the company may say, I own 50% of this, the government owns 50% of it. You do not have to inventory, or you do have to inventory it. And then you iron out the details of how that is administered a lot easier than any other FAR-based contract. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Thanks, Angel. We have another question in the chat. And sometimes, there's audit fatigue that contractors experience. So the question is, if a contractor is primarily a sub, but does have some prime contracts, why can't primes rely on one audit rather than have DCMA perform them, and other primes perform audits?
I could give you the ball, Bob, or I could dribble it and take it down, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, go ahead. Because DCMA, they're the ones who are going to be, instituting that. They're going to want to perform. I mean, we've had occurrences like that where we've been the prime, and we've had subcontractors being audited by DCMAs in those areas, on the West Coast. So I guess I'm not sure how DCMA assigns, those responsibilities. But we've had cases where we've been a prime and we've subcontracted, let's say, on the West Coast, being audited by DCMA down there.
Absolutely. And so whoever asked the question, I share your sentiments about audit fatigue. I am fatigued right now. I have bags under my eyes, and I'm not going on a trip. No, but for audit fatigue, I share your sentiments. What we try to do in DCMA property is we try to figure out whenever we're performing our scheduling of audits for the following year, for fiscal year, we start in October. We try to figure out, okay, have you received another audit? When are you being audited? That way we're not doing it back to back, and we could especially space it out. But there's only 170 something property administrators in the whole DCMA. So sometimes that makes it a little bit challenging. And some of the other audits that may not have been mentioned here are service provider audits. For example, you may have the Army or the contracts that we do not administer. Maybe they're going down to the contractor and they're also auditing. So we try to work around your schedule to make it as easy as we can. But when it comes to prime and subcontractor relationship, DCMA does not. We do not go into your. If you're the prime, we do not go into your subcontract to audit them specifically for the contracts that you have.
Yeah.
We audit the prime, and then the prime has a responsibility to audit or to assess their subcontractors. However, you may have, now that everything, companies buy each other out. So you may have a prime contractor, let's say Northrop Grumman, and then you have another prime contractor that's GD, General Dynamics, and they're both subs to each other. So they're primes, but they're also subs to each other. They issue some work to another company. And I'm just making up two because those are some of the bigger ones in our area. In those cases, whenever we audit one contractor, so contractor A as the prime, we're excluding any property that contractor B sent them because they're the sub. So if you're the sub, we're not looking at your stuff. And, And then when we go to contractor B, we're excluding the property that belongs to contractor A. So sometimes that makes it a little bit challenging. So we don't have a privity of contract, so we cannot audit your subcontractors. We only focus on the prime contractor. But with everything being convoluted, where one contractor is the prime, another one's a sub, but they're both prime contractors, you may have two property administrators auditing the same prime, and then you have the program officer, someone going to the subcontractors to audit them as well. So I share your sentiments. I'm with you on that. And if we could find a way to crack that nut, let me know.
Yeah, maybe it could be a New Year's resolution almost. While we're on the topic of audits, has the DoD been successful in obtaining a clean audit opinion for financial records of government property?
Not yet. Unfortunately, they have not been. We have not been successful as of yet. There's still a couple of open areas to adjudicate. They gave us our notice of findings and responses or results, NFRs, and essentially that's kind of like our car. So they give us a car about certain items that need to be fixed, and we're still working on that. Last year, I had an opportunity to work at the Pentagon, and I was there for the entire year. It was virtual, but I was working in the Pentagon, and we got to meet a lot of the fire auditors and learn about some of the briefs, and not just the briefs, but see what some of the efforts that our services, Army, Air Force, Navy, some of the things that they're doing. And I got a deeper and a better understanding of some of the challenges that are faced. It's not a matter of just you have property accounted for, but you have to update IT system requirements for cyber security. You have to make sure that you make a lot of reporting entities from all the different services, all the different systems, all the systems the contractors may be using to feed the ledger, the accounting ledger. So it's balancing the books, but it's on a comptroller level for DoD. So that's what makes it quite a bit challenging. But a set of good news is that we appear to be tracking in a positive trend. Back in December or January, we have a fire team led by Mr. Andrew Obermeyer, which is also an NCMA member and a frequent panelist and speaker. I believe he spoke at your national seminar last year. But he led our effort, and we received a qualified opinion for the FY fiscal year 2023 fire service provided audit. What that means is that service components that have contracts administered by DCMA they don't have to no longer perform their own audits on those contracts and those contractors, those systems, because we passed on our end, which means that there's fidelity and there's an assumption that these systems are good to go because we have a qualified opinion. So that's another step in the right direction to help resolve DoD's material weakness associated with property in the possession of defense contractors. So we're not there yet, but we're getting there. And DCMA, we got a good opinion, so we're tracking. We just have to get all the other services and everybody else on board, and also clean up our act because we still have some areas that need to be fixed.
Thanks, Angel. And this next question from the audience, I'd like to direct to Bob. And it is a transfer modification needed to transfer property from a task order to an IDIQ under the same contract?
Yeah, you'd need to transfer. I guess any transfer, you're going to want both the contracting officers from both sides to transfer and have a mod for that transfer. I don't know. You said you heard different opinions. I don't know. Angel, is there anything different than on your side that you would see with that, or?
A little bit, not so much as of late, but it's been a little bit like the Wild West. At least about 10 years ago, it was where the property was held at the IDIQ, at the basic level, either a G type or a D type contract, depending on what it is. And then they said they will write something in the contract that says, yeah, you could use this between these delivery orders. And it's because in those cases there was tooling, so they had the rent and usage clause 52-245-9. So with that, they were able to say, okay, we could put it in there. But we've had quite a bit of cleanup over the last decade or so, and as of now, it needs to be transferred on a task order basis because that's what's carrying the terms and conditions of the contract, the liability, and to the point you just made, Bob, you may have a basic ordering agreement from the Army, and then one task order may belong to the Marine Corps, another one may belong to the Air Force, and one service may not be using it, or if somebody's using it more than the other one and it needs to be repaired, who's going to pay for that repair? If it gets damaged, who's going to pay for that repair, or who's going to grant relief? So it just makes it it makes it a little bit more combative, because now if I'm the Army, I'm saying, I'm not paying for that. You broke it. Well, you had it. My stuff, but you had it under your task order, so now you have to fix it. But if it's under the basic, it makes it a little bit harder to prove that. So I've seen it both ways. More in the past. As of now, it has to be on the task order, and you have to do a transfer, GFP transfer, which feeds the IUAD registry, which makes sure that everybody knows where the property is located.
Yeah, the time frame. Sometimes the time. I mean, you're talking multiple agencies. The time frame could be. They've never, in my experience, they've never responded in a timely manner. They've got something that's going from the Air Force to the Army. It's like, pulling teeth.
Yeah, and I do have I gained some insight on that last year at our National Educational Seminar. We had a presentation by Mr. Overmeyer, and he was a PCO, procurement contracting officer. And he was able to share some of those concerns or some of the reasons. There's different types of PCOs. So you have a PCO office, a program office, and within that program office, you may have 12 or 20 PCOs. And you'll have a PCO that's in charge of the actual delivery or the statement of work, another one that's responsible for the bidding and the negotiation and that type of stuff. But reaching the right PCO, sometimes they can't give you the answer right away, because they have to figure out whose piece of the pie does this fall in under. And another one that I hadn't thought about, which he shared with us, is throughout the year, sometimes they have to go away for months at a time, and they have to do sealed bidding and source selection and that type of stuff. And whenever that happens, it's not a matter of, let me put my out of office and I'm not going to respond to emails. They don't want it to be contaminated and influenced in any way. So they'll go to another base or another location, and they will be totally disconnected, and they will not have any time to actually go through and respond in a timely fashion. Unfortunately, I've seen quite a bit of turnover, and that gave me a deeper appreciation. And I used to be one of those that I know we're collaborative, and this is DCMA, but I used to say, man, these contracting officers, man, what the heck are they doing? They just need this property, to get rid of. But now I kind of understand and have empathy for them, and I definitely don't want that job. But that's something that I learned as well.
All right. Well, over the past hour and a half, we've heard a lot of valuable information about government property, strategic insights, and best practices. And as we prepare to close, I would just like to ask one final question of each of you. In 30 seconds or less, what is the main message that you would like the audience to take away from the presentation today?
Well, for me, we wanted to focus on collaboration and cooperation, and both internally and externally. You want respectful conversation, getting responsible stakeholders together to resolve issues, working together on both sides between the government and contractor without fear of repercussion. I think those are some keys.
I agree 100%. Collaboration, it is a contracting team. If I don't know the answer, I will get somebody that's way smarter than me to help me with the answer. And it's definitely not a combative relationship. We definitely want to make sure that we have the best outcome possible. We can't do it without you. And we appreciate the insight and all the collaboration that it takes to put this thing together. When I say this thing, I mean to put our deliverable, our item, whatever we're making. Our companies are making some amazing things. Our defense industrial base is strong, but we're looking to get new entrants. And the only way for us to do that is to be critical, be critical about what we're doing, why we're doing it, how can we get better at that stuff. And the only way we do that is by evaluating and providing feedback to each other. And avenues like this are perfect ways to do that. So thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this today.
Yeah, this has been a terrific platform. So thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Boston, you did a great job.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks to our panelists, Bob and Angel, for their input, and also to the audience for listening and asking some really thought-provoking questions. We covered a lot of information about property from a government and an industry perspective. And we hope that all of this information was useful to your professional development, your careers, and your organizations. As mentioned earlier, Our contact information is listed on the attachment. Please feel free to contact us with any questions or comments. And with that, I'll hand it over to Don.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, I'm not Don, but I'm going to step in here before Don does. And thank you so much. This has been a very informative discussion. The questions were outstanding. Thank you to everyone in the chat for doing this. As the VP of Broadcasting, this is our second event we've done here with the StreamYard platform. I really hope you all like it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can reach out to me at broadcasting@ncmaboston.com. I know Don's probably going to plug it, but I'm going to plug it again. The NCMA Boston March Workshop online is open attendance. In person is almost sold out. And I also want to let you know, if you came to this event and you saw our Meet the Speaker series with Bob and Angel, I've got Meet the Speaker series to help you all decide what sessions you all may want to go to. And that's on the YouTube page. It's going to be attached in the agenda once the final agenda comes out. We can't wait to see you at the March Workshop. Don, take us home.
All right. Well, thanks, Adam. Always love a good plug for the March Workshop. That is, of course, our signature annual event. So we only have enough space for 300 in-person attendees. So, of course, those do go fast every year, as those of us that are perennial guests can attest to. So if you can, get registered sooner rather than later. We would love to have you in person. Of course, we're offering again virtual this year. This is something we started a couple of years ago. And honestly, you know, this chapter, NCMA Boston, this is our 63rd annual year. And it's one of the oldest chapters, if not the oldest, in NCMA. We always are trying to be on the cutting edge of technology and being able to facilitate, you know, these engagements, both for, you know, our local constituents and people around, not just the United States, but occasionally we've been starting to get some international interest as well. Probably some of our people, you know, they just love listening even when they're on vacation or working overseas. So platforms like this, of course, are brand new. StreamYard, to toot Adam's horn here, this was all brought to you by Adam's diligence. Being able to interact like this virtually has been a huge new add to our platform base for virtual. And we are getting increasing numbers of people outside of our local area. Every one of these events, I can't thank you all enough for attending today. Our speakers, Angel, Bob, Andrew, you are a testament to our profession. It has been a pleasure and an honor to be able to work with you guys to set this up and then to facilitate today. Thank you for allowing me to host, and thank you for always engaging so well with NCMA Boston. It's always a pleasure. Hopefully everybody, we had a lot of engagement today. Love that. Thank you for all of our contributors. Everybody, that's it for today. Thank you for attending. We do monthly engagements, so please check back often at ncmaboston.org. And remember, you get CPEs for attending our educational events, including the March Workshop. And you can apply those to, you can use those to apply and to renew your NCMA certifications. So please check those out and check back frequently. Thank you so much, everyone. Can't thank you enough. Signing off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.